This episode of Distraction is sponsored by Landmark College, offering bachelor's and associate programs, short-term and summer programs for students who learn differently. Learn more at lcdistraction.org. Landmark College, the college of choice for students who learn differently.
It's not very possible anymore to just turn off the mind. But if we can at least make the mind and the body idle for a little bit without just quickly turning our attention to our devices that actually then begin to shape the patterning and the wiring of the brain and create strong habits in us, we can just every once in a while rely on just ourselves. And it will feel like doing nothing, even though it is very rich and potent.
Hello, and welcome to Distraction. This is Dr. Ned Hallowell with a wonderful guest. Joining me today all the way from Portland, Oregon, is Doreen Dodgen-Magee. She's a psychologist and the author of a new book called Deviced, Balancing Life and Technology in a Digital World. I love that use of the noun as a verb, deviced. We're being deviced. Let me just jump in and let you tell us what is the theme of this book, and I can guess what the theme is, but I'd love to hear it in your words.
Thank you so much. So the theme is basically just illuminating the four ways in which research is telling us that technology is now having a pretty profound effect on people, and that is, or those are, number one, we're experiencing our world in a different way in terms of our own sense of embodiment. We live a much more robust parts of our lives now in digital spaces sometimes than we do in embodied ones. The second area of impact is neurological and physiological, just how our bodies and brains are changing as a result of overexposure to tech. And then the third is that our relationships and the scaffolding upon which we are building relationships is changing. And the fourth area is the way in which we develop or maybe are not developing a robust sense of self. So the book just dives deep into those four areas and then also takes a pretty deep dive into some really practical and, I think, approachable ways that we can enliven and enrich our embodied lives so that we have good and compelling reasons to step away from our tech at least some of the time. I'm all about moderation, not abstinence.
Yeah. Those four areas just zipped right by me, and I bet they did our listeners too. So just name them again just so I can kind of savor them a little bit.
Yeah, so our sense of embodiment is changed.
Embodiment meaning what? What does embodiment mean?
Meaning the way that we either are or are not in our skin. So much of our experiences now are offloaded into these digital spaces. Things like even as small as ordering a coffee drink on an app and paying for it on an app and picking it up at a different counter rather than going into the coffee shop, having eye-to-eye contact with somebody as you make an order. You pay for your drink. You experience the boredom of waiting for the drink. And then you pick it up. So that's what I mean by embodiment. That our brains and our bodies are changing. And then the way in which we build and maintain relationships is changing, and then the way that we are or are not developing a sense of self.
How do you measure that or assess that, or how do you decide when it's a good thing and when it's not a good thing?
That is such a good question. I have come up with a bit of an assessment tool that I use, and I think it's a pretty complex discussion to think about. Is my use helping me or harming me? And I think that there are ways that we can look at things like, what is my ability to focus? What is my ability to delay gratification? Can I regulate my own kind of emotional and intellectual and physical experiences on my own, or do I have to turn to my devices? We can begin kind of in both subtle and direct ways asking questions like that of ourselves and really looking at how those are impacted by our relationship with our devices. And we can figure out if they're helping or hurting us. I do not think it's a one-size-fits-all kind of question.
So what if you say, like, I bet most people would say, yeah, I'm conducting more relationships via text and email and Facebook and LinkedIn and what have you. And yeah, I'm more impatient than I used to be and probably don't delay gratification as well as maybe I used to. What should I do about that? Is that a bad thing? Because I can get a lot more done than I used to do when I had to send snail mail and when I had to wait in line to get my coffee or when I had to wait at the checkout counter. And now I can just order from Amazon and I don't have to go shopping nearly as much. And so maybe my impatience is being rewarded, What are the action steps? What should a person do about it?
Well, the first thing that I love to do when people say those things to me, because they do all the time, is I love to listen really well and just help them be heard and really to try to learn from them. And one of the things that always blows my mind is that the conversation very quickly turns to, yes, I feel more of a sense of productivity, and I also feel this ambient sense of overstimulation or of an inability to keep up. And so those are the things that I have just such deep compassion for. This human experience of our drive toward productivity has allowed us to sacrifice a sense of what I call an internal locus of control, being able to kind of be calm and focused and still inside of ourselves. Some of the action items I encourage are as simple as trying, even though it's very hard, trying to integrate something like a 10-minute period every day where you I think ideally that 10 minutes would be spent with something like mindfulness meditation, even just 10 minutes a day of what I call doing nothing or being bored. The Dutch have a word, niksen, which means doing nothing deliciously. And so even just integrating small...
Nixon, like our former president?
Yeah. Isn't that funny? It's Niksen, but it's pronounced the same way. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. And it's this idea of doing nothing deliciously, just literally letting your mind wander and kind of creating intentional space where we're not going to be productive. So even a small practice like that, or every once in a while reading something on paper rather than on screen, but just to kind of keep our personal agency skills intact by doing some things away from our devices, as well as just making sure we keep our communication skills intact as well.
People listening to you make those suggestions. Mm-hmm. I'll bet you nobody would disagree with any of them. But I wonder how many people will actually implement them. What's the urgent incentive to do it?
Great question. So I think I will answer that with a story. I was at a university a couple of years ago doing some lectures, and those are always some of my favorite times because I find that young adults are hungry for help in figuring out how to, some of the time, step away from this frantic pace that technology offers us. And I happened to be invited back a year after I was there the first time, and I was just on campus watching an athletic event, and somebody came over to me and said, I just want to tell you that last year when you were on campus and you taught us how to do a 10-minute silent sit, and you challenged us to link that with something that we do every day so that we make sure and do it. I have for the last year been, every time I pick up my video game controller, the first time of the day, I force myself to put it down and I set a timer for 10 minutes and I try to do nothing. And I feel so much better. And that's, just something just as simple as that has spoken volumes to me about just feeling like that person has developed the ability to say to himself, oh, if I really need to, I can step away from this, this thing that is exciting and fun. Sometimes it's being able to step away from the thing that is stressful and work or whatever it is, but I can do it. That sense of I can get still and quiet within myself. I can, for lack of a better word, in control of my device use rather than it feeling in control of me.
Or do nothing deliciously.
Yes.
And again, that's Niksening?
Niksen, Niksen, yep.
And that's Dutch?
Dutch, yep.
And it's a verb.
It is. Mm-hmm.
So I just Nixoned? Or,
yep.
I just had a good time Nixoning?
Yep. You got
so
it.
I Nixoned. So we should all aim to Nixon for 15 minutes a day. Do nothing deliciously.
Yeah, and then I think even go beyond that. The concept I'm working on right now in my work is that of wanting to invite the world to my big boredom party.
Give me an idea of how do you do nothing deliciously?
Oh, gosh. So many ways. One of the things that I find is that, our drive toward productivity, which you brought up, really leads us to even feel like if we accomplish the next level of a game, we feel more productive than if we've just stood in line. And so that's the first thing, is kind of valuing something new, which is this idea that doing nothing deliciously can actually build our brain and build our bodies and build a capacity to be within ourselves. And so it could look like standing in line without pulling out your phone out of your pocket, and developing the art of, telling yourself fun and silly stories about the people that you're in line with. Or it could look like, rather than attempting the next level of a game that you play on your device, instead to sit and pull out a pen and sketch on the napkin that that's at your table, do a silly self-portrait sketch. Or it could look like higher order tasks, like genuinely developing the ability to really sit and look at the clouds for 10 minutes. Even if you have distracting thoughts, look at them, notice that they're there, and then set them aside and let them, kind of communicate with them. I'll be back with you in 9 more minutes. I'm going to sit here and try to take in my surroundings.
So you don't really mean do nothing. You're doing something. You're looking at clouds, or you're following your thoughts, you're daydreaming.
Yeah, so what I think about it is kind of like when a car is in idle. The engine is still running, it just isn't moving, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the way I'm beginning to think about boredom, that it's not very possible anymore to just turn off the mind. But if we can at least make the mind and the body idle for a little bit without just quickly turning our attention to our devices, that actually then begin to shape the patterning and the wiring of the brain and create strong habits in us, we can just every once in a while rely on just ourselves. And it will feel like doing nothing, even though it is very rich and potent.
And what do you propose is the benefit of this?
Oh, the benefit is it's multi-dimensional and multi-layered. There is some evidence that 10 minutes a day of mindfulness meditation or contemplative kind of experience, or in some research it looks like rhythmic exercise, which is that kind of exercise that gets you in a zone, that those kinds of 10-minute periods, if they're sustained and committed to for 4 to 6 months, can actually double the gray matter in the parts of the brain related to attention and focus. There's other research that shows that the myelinization of the brain in those areas is enhanced by that kind of a practice. It's amazing to me, no matter what the point of the conversation is where I enter into it with people about device use and tech, it very quickly goes to this sense of, I feel overwhelmed, I feel chaotic, I feel distracted. And I've seen it now anecdotally happen over and over with people when we give ourselves another way and we give some value to stepping away, that we do just anecdotally see kind of an increase in contentment in life. Actually, there is some new research out as well from the University of Pennsylvania. It was our first piece of research that was not just correlational. So it wasn't just that there was a correlation between feelings of agitation and fear of missing out and some symptoms that look like depression with social media use, but actually that there is a causal impact that social media use can cause some of those dynamics. So again, just stepping away for a bit can really have an impact on our sense of agitation, feelings of depression, maybe anxiety, and fear of missing out. So I think there's a wide range of benefits.
Now, what about the upside to some of all of this? Because we all decry the screens and the busyness and the texting and all of that, but let's not miss the upside to it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
You want to talk about that for a minute?
Sure. There are so many profound, wonderful things about technology. Its advances in the area of medicine are profound. The tricky thing for me at this point in history is that it is actually being created in such a way that we aren't encouraged to experience that kind of diversity of thought and person. If it was created in such a way that it really delivered all the amazing potential within it, which I believe is there, we'd have exposure to all kinds of ideas and places and people that challenged our own thinking and stretched our own development and growth. So I do think that potential is out there. The one other piece about the research of the positive effects of technology, which I really respect, and it's fantastic research, is that a lot of it doesn't tell us if the gains that we make within the digital domain are transferable outside of it. Meaning, so there's a lot of research that says when we use high amounts of creative-minded technologies, we become more creative. But it doesn't tell us if we become more creative outside of the digital domain. It only tells us we become more creative within it. And so that's a curious point about some of the positive impact research that I'd like to see more about.
I was struck by one of the articles about you. It said if you're still uncomfortable with the idea of doing nothing, try to trick your mind into thinking you're being productive. Ms. Dodgen-Magee suggests using open-end toys such as, and then I didn't know what any of these three were, so I want you to tell us what they are. Kinetic sand, Baoding balls, or marble runs. What are those three things?
Yeah, so kinetic sand is this fantastic substance. It's marketed under several different trade names, but it's a sand with a polymer attached to it, and when you put it in a bowl and you put it in your lap and you kind of begin playing with it, it is a very it's a kinesthetically interesting substance, and it's also just interesting to look at. It will somewhat hold its shape and form, but then it will slowly disintegrate, and it just has a really beautiful feeling.
Oh, that stuff. I've seen that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
It is amazing.
So if you play with that, you'll think you're doing something, but you're not. So that's a way of doing nothing, tricking yourself into doing something if you're one of these people who has to be doing something.
That's right. And things like marble runs are, you could set it up ahead of time, but, you can create a little pathway that if you put a marble on it, it goes through the pathway and runs down it. And it just is another thing that's kind of meditative.
Baoding balls, Baoding balls?
Oh, yes. Those are those Chinese meditation balls. They are metal, and they have a small chime in them, and you hold them in the palm of your hand, and they have kind of a cool, slick feeling, and you just slowly rotate them between each other or around each other. But again, it's just it has this small sound, it's got this feeling, and it involves an action that is repetitive, and it's just another way of kind of entering into a more still state, but not expecting us to just sit still for 10 minutes, which I think is a hard ask for most people anymore.
Oh, it definitely is. This is a wonderful book. I'm going to have to buy it and read it. It looks just fantastic. And you're urging us to basically untrain ourselves. I mean, we used to know how to do all of this naturally, and then we've entered in this worldwide behavioral conditioning regimen that we're all part of. And now you're saying take advantage of the fact that you can voluntarily withdraw from the conditioning program.
Yes, and I think the need is more strong than ever when so many of our institutions are not heeding this call. It puts more of the responsibility on us personally, as screens move more and more and more into the classroom, and as we are required to use them more and more for our vocational settings, it really is on us and on parents to help us not just encounter those moments where we can look away from our screens and, connect in with ourselves, but also to offer inconvenient, uncomfortable, and boring opportunities. We have to create them and value them and pitch them in such a way that they have meaning, which may require a lot of inconvenience on the part of parents in terms of, tolerating physical objects being out and about in the house, all kinds of things. But if we could just value and engage those moments, I think we would have so much of a stronger feeling of being able to come back into ourselves and be calm and feel somewhat of a personal agency than we do right now.
Oh, I think you're so right. Well, you're doing wonderful work. I couldn't endorse your work more enthusiastically. It's just terrific. And The book, again, is called Deviced. I love that. Deviced. We've all been deviced. But if you've been deviced, you can undevice.
Yes.
It's a wonderful book. Again, Deviced, Balancing Life and Technology in a Digital World. I can tell just from your voice, you're just a breath of fresh air and a tremendously high energy and high octane positive person. And thank you so much for joining us, Doreen Dodgen-Magee.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, that's our show for today. Many thanks to Dr. Doreen Dodgen-Magee for joining me. And please let us know your thoughts on this subject. What actions are you going to take? Let us know what worked and what didn't. Did you Nixon? Send a voicemail or memo or email with your thoughts to connect@distractionpodcast.com. That's connect@distractionpodcast.com. We'll be sure to share your comments in a future episode. Distraction is created by Sounds Great Media. Our producer is the ever wonderful, beautiful, and effervescent Sarah Guertin, and the podcast is recorded and mixed by the amazingly talented Pat Keogh.